The Incredible Hulk movie review. So I'm going to ramble on a little bit here and talk about the Hulk generally. As a kid, I always found the Incredible Hulk fascinating. And I was never a big Marvel fan as a kid. I didn't read the Marvel comic books. I was more into DC. I didn't watch any of the Incredible Hulk cartoon shows regularly. That 70s show was just a little bit before my time, but was still being rerun on TV when I was younger. I didn't watch that show regularly, although I absorbed some of it through cultural osmosis. I guess what I'm saying is I don't know a lot about the Hulk. But to the extent I knew about him, I found it fascinating. I found the idea of an anti-hero fascinating, which I think Marvel did a lot of back in those days. I found the idea fascinating of like this tragic story of, how it's completely ruined Bruce Banner's life. And, in the TV show, I think he has to roam from town to town because he can never settle down because of this curse of the Hulk. It's kind of like, like the werewolf movies, which I also found fascinating when I was a kid. But he's also kind of a superhero, except he's only a superhero in the right circumstances because you never know what the Hulk is going to do. Like, he just smashes stuff. So at times, the other superheroes have to work to control the Hulk. At other times, if the Hulk is unleashed on the bad guys, then he can be a force for good. He's very unpredictable. And then the tragic story of Bruce Banner made it interesting, and the idea that Bruce Banner doesn't even want to be a superhero and he's trying to get rid of this curse. I'm probably not doing a good job of explaining this, but maybe I don't need to. I mean, maybe the appeal of this is just kind of self-evident. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's just kind of cool to have this tragic story of Bruce Banner, who doesn't even want to be a superhero and is saddled by this. So when the 2003 Ang Lee movie came out, I was looking forward to it a lot. I didn't review it at the time because 2003 was before I started blogging all my movie reviews, but I have some memories of it. I remember mostly being disappointed by it, and then trying to put my finger on exactly what disappointed me about it. Because, it wasn't all bad. They did attempt to get into Bruce Banner's kind of tragic story and kind of explore some of the psychology behind the Hulk. But then there were also just large scenes of the Hulk running around smashing stuff. And that's not so complex. Now, granted, maybe part of the problem is I was just way too old by the time I saw that movie. If I had been 10 years old when that movie came out, maybe that would have been the greatest thing ever, to just see the Hulk make huge jumps and smash tanks and stuff like that. Because that is the other big appeal of the Hulk. There's the complex psychological aspect to it. Actually, it's not really that complex, but it's one of those things that when you're a kid, you think is more complex than it is. But then there's also just the Hulk smashing stuff. And when I was younger, I used to love those old Godzilla movies where you just watch him smash stuff for like 2 hours. So this does appeal to kind of young boys who are of a certain age. I was probably too old by the time I saw it. And then there was, I don't know if you remember this from the 2003 Ang Lee movie, there was scenes where he was fighting those what were they? Those genetically modified dogs. Or he was fighting those 3 mutant dogs, whatever they were. I remember thinking when I was watching it, okay, I know those dogs aren't really real. They're computer generated. And I know the Hulk is computer generated. So I thought, what am I doing watching this? It's just like, none of this is actually real. There's no actors. It's just like watching a cartoon on the screen, is what I thought at the time. Now, of course, we've gotten to the point now where I think most action sequences, or a lot of action sequences in Hollywood movies, are completely computer generated. So, like, if this would have happened nowadays, I wouldn't even have cared. Except that back in 2003, the computer-generated effects were not quite as good, so it felt a little bit more cartoony at the time. I don't know. I'm a bit old school. I don't like... If I'm watching a live-action film, I like the actors to be live-action. I don't like it when everything in a scene is just computer-generated, unless I'm watching a cartoon. And then fair enough, because that's what I signed up for. So all of that's a bit of a background into my own personal biases before I get into this 2008 movie. 2008 movie stars Ed Norton, and Ed Norton is one of my favorite actors of all time. I love just about everything he's in. I think he brings a lot of drama and intensity to it. So I was really excited when he was announced as starring in this. And then, by the way, foreshadowing slightly to the next reviews, I was really upset when he got dumped in the future Marvel movies, which I guess was reportedly because he tried to exercise too much control over this movie, and they just didn't want to deal with him in the future. Now, Mark Ruffalo has also been great in that role, but I just really love Ed Norton. Also, I'm a bit of a continuity nerd. It bugs me that now the continuity between this movie doesn't line up with the other Marvel movies because they changed actors. But actually, speaking of continuity, I heard somewhere on the internet that the reason this movie starts out in South America was because the makers of this movie wanted to give the impression of having continuity with the 2003 Ang Lee movie. I mean, they don't really have continuity. They're by different companies or whatever. But they have like an imagined continuity. Like the 2003 movie deals with the origins of the Hulk. This 2008 movie doesn't deal with any of his origins, right? So, if you want to know where the Hulk originated from, you'd have to go back to the 2003 movie. And I don't believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there's anything in these two movies that will contradict each other. So you could imagine that they're all part of the same canon, which is kind of cool. Maybe. It means like the Marvel Cinematic Universe actually goes all the way back to 2003. So this movie starts out in Portugal, to have sort of an imagined continuity with the ending of the previous movie. And it's got... I thought the Portugal scenes were actually pretty cool in this movie. And again, I really love Ed Norton as an actor. And then they get another brilliant actor, Tim Roth, in on this movie. Tim Roth is another actor I'm a huge fan of. So when you have Ed Norton and Tim Roth in this movie, it has the potential to be much more than another dumb comic book movie. It has a potential to be something with a lot more drama on it. On the whole, I think the writers made the correct decision to focus more on Bruce Banner than on the Hulk in this movie. And again, with Ed Norton playing the title role, I think that paid off. And yet, when Ed Norton turned into the Hulk, and then it was just this computer animated thing smashing up stuff, then I started to get a little bit bored. And again, maybe that's because I'm not 10 years old anymore. Maybe if I had been 10 years old, I would have enjoyed this movie a lot more. And then the final scene was just two computer-generated things fighting, which, I don't know, I thought was pretty boring, that big climactic battle at the end. Maybe the Hulk just can't carry his own franchise. I mean, Bruce Banner is a fascinating character, but I think a lot of the best Hulk stories, even in the comic books, have been when he's been part of the Avengers team and he's been like a problem that the other Avengers had to deal with, rather than just this thing smashing stuff in his own movie. Yeah, he's just... Bruce Banner is interesting, but the Hulk is not. I guess is where I'm coming off of this. And right at the end of this movie, the Hulk movie, they do have that little tie-in to the larger Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's unfortunate, in my view, that they didn't get Edward Norton to stay with the franchise. Or more accurately, I guess he was kicked out of the franchise because Edward Norton would have loved to stay, but they just didn't want to deal with him anymore. But Mark Ruffalo did an okay job, and I think what they've done with the Hulk character since then in the other Marvel movies has been interesting. Maybe at some point in the future they can try and give him his own solo movie again, but I don't know. He does work better as part of the Avengers than he does in his own solo movies.